right. For week 6 Friday. First off, you will notice that I have created myself a reminder so I don't forget to talk about pages for today's reading section ahead of time. And also, I'm going to be sharing a few more television statistics with you. And I've got some other supplementary things as well, but we will continue reading today and find out what Captain Beatty wants to talk to Montag about. So, statistics today focus on commercialism, our favorite part of television. The number of 30-second TV commercials seen in a year by an average child, 16,000. Number of TV commercials seen by the average person by the age of 65, 2 million. Total spending by 100 leading TV advertisers in 1993, 15 billion. So that was back in 1993. I can only imagine what it is now. I haven't been able to find it. But I did find that the most expensive commercial that was ever made was a Chanel perfume commercial back in 2004, which came in at the price tag of $33 million for one commercial. Whew. To be fair, it did have Nicole Kidman in it, but still, a commercial. They're like a minute long at the most. Anyways, so commercialism is definitely one of the dark sides of television, I would say. Note to students, today's reading will start on page 25 where we left off, and it'll go to page, I think it's 30. I guess I should double check. I believe it's either 30 or maybe the top of 31. There's a page break. That's how you know it is, I guess it's 31. Yes, very top of 31. Okay, revised document, 25 to 31. Okay. All right. So from 25 to the very top of page 31 is what we will attack today. But before we get to that, I have a thing for you. Again, I will not be able to play this on Canvas because there's that weird echo effect if I try and like play something. I think it's like the microphones are feeding back or something. But if you click on this, you can watch a clip from the delightful children's movie WALL-E. Now, why am I showing a clip from WALL-E in class? You may be asking yourself. If you have seen WALL-E, then you are familiar with the fact that WALL-E, in addition to being an adorable kids movie and a little love story between two robots, it is a futuristic dystopia. And you may not have thought of it that way before, but if you think about the condition that the Earth is in, so trashed and so disgusting that remaining humans have had to leave and have had to, let me just turn down the volume so I can show you this without the microphone feedback. And they have had to abandon Earth to live in a big spaceship in the sky. So, adorable little robot WALL-E, who has been trying to clean things up down on Earth, is headed to this spaceship to find the robot love of his life, Eva. And yeah, when you get to the bit on the ship with the humans, I just want you to make note of the ways that the technology is humanized. So WALL-E has many emotions and mannerisms that we would associate with human beings. He is personified to a great degree, as are many of the other robots. But the humans on the ship have lost much of their humanity and have become absorbed in, you guessed it, technology. So I will let you watch that clip with actual sound. And you can see how this futuristic prediction of what the world might end up as, what it looks like for human beings, what's happened to the human race, and how has technology sort of taken over things that we take for granted for doing now. So anyways, I leave you with that adorable WALL-E clip as a futuristic dystopia. And then I will be sharing another short story with you. And I do mean short story. It's not terribly long. But this particular short story, which I'll explain a few more connections to once we're done with today's reading, this is by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. He's a noted sci-fi author. And whereas Fahrenheit 451 focuses on happiness, this society has become twisted due to this warped idea of how to achieve happiness, Harrison Bergeron focuses on equality. Society has become a dystopia because of a warped idea of how to achieve equality. So, anyways, Harrison Bergeron awaits you after today's reading. But let's get to Captain Beatty so he can tell us a little bit more about life in this time and why it's so important for Montag to be a fireman. Where did we leave off? There it is. Okay, so Captain Beatty is at the door. Montag is in the bed, laying on his pillow, which is on top of a book. So, see how this goes. Montag did not move, but stood looking into the cold whiteness of the wall immediately before him. Go let him in, will you? Tell him I'm sick. Tell him yourself! She ran a few steps this way, a few steps that, and stopped, eyes wide, when the front door speaker called her name, softly, softly. Mrs. Montag, Mrs. Montag, someone here, someone here, Mrs. Montag, Mrs. Montag, someone's here. Fading. Montag made sure the book was well hidden behind the pillow, climbed slowly back into bed, arranged the covers over his knees and across his chest, half sitting, and after a while Mildred moved and went out of the room, and Captain Beatty strolled in, his hands in his pockets. Shut the relatives up, said Beatty, looking around at everything except Montag and his wife. This time, Mildred ran. The yammering voices stopped yelling in the parlor. Captain Beatty sat down in the most comfortable chair with a peaceful look on his ruddy face. He took time to prepare and light his brass pipe and puff out a great smoke cloud. Just thought I'd come by and see how the sick man is. How'd you guess? Beatty smiled his smile, which showed the candy pinkness of his gums and the tiny candy whiteness of his teeth. I've seen it all. You were going to call for a night off. Montag sat in bed. Well, said Beatty, take the night off. He examined his eternal matchbox, the lid of which said, guaranteed 1,000,000 lights in this igniter, and began to strike the chemical match abstractedly. Blow out, strike, blow out, strike, speak a few words, blow out. He looked at the flame. He blew. He looked at the smoke. When will you be well? Tomorrow? The next day, maybe? First of the week. Beatty puffed his pipe. Every fireman, sooner or later, hits this. They only need understanding to know how the wheels run, need to know the history of our profession. They don't feed it to rookies like they used to. Damn shame. Puff. Only fire chiefs remember it now. Puff. I'll let you in on it. Mildred fidgeted. Beatty took a full minute to settle himself in and think back for what he wanted to say. When did it all start, you ask, this job of ours? How did it come about? Where? When? Well, I'd say it really got started around about a thing called the Civil War, even though our rule book claims it was founded earlier. The fact is, we didn't get along well until photography came into its own. Then, motion pictures in the early 20th century. Radio, television. Things began to have mass. Montag sat in bed, not moving. And because they had mass, they became simpler, said Beatty. Once, books appealed to a few people, here, there, everywhere. They could afford to be different. The world was roomy. But then the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths, double, triple, quadruple population. Films and radios, magazines, books leveled down to a sort of paste-pudding norm. Do you follow me? I think so. Beatty peered at the smoke pattern he had put out on the air. Picture it. 19th century man with his horses, dogs, carts, slow motion. Then in the 20th century, speed up your camera. Books cut shorter, condensations, digest, tabloids. Everything boils down to the gag, the snap ending. Snap ending, Mildred nodded. Classics, cut to fit 15-minute radio shows, then cut again to fill a 2-minute book column, winding up at last as a 10 or 12-line dictionary resume. I exaggerate, of course. The dictionaries were for reference, but many were those whose sole knowledge of Hamlet. You know the title, certainly, Montag. It is probably only a faint rumor of a title to you, Mrs. Montag. Whose sole knowledge, as I say, of Hamlet was a 1-page digest in a book that claimed, now at last you can read all the classics, keep up with your neighbors. Do you see? Out of the nursery, into the college, and back to the nursery. There's your intellectual pattern for the past 5 centuries or more. Mildred arose and began to move around the room, picking things up and putting them down. Beatty ignored her and continued. Speed up the film, Montag. Quick. Click, pick, look, I, now, flick, here, there, swift pace, up, down, in, out, why, how, who, what, where, bang, smack, wallop, bing, bong, boom. Digest, 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 digest. Politics? 1 column, 2 sentences, a headline. Then in midair, all vanishes. Whirl man's mind around about so fast under all the pumping hands of publishers, exploiters, broadcasters, that the centrifuge flings off all unnecessary, time-wasting thought. Mildred smoothed the bedclothes. Montag felt his heart jump, and jump again as she patted his pillow. Right now she was pulling at his shoulder to try to get him to move so she could take the pillow out and fix it nicely and put it back, and perhaps cry out and stare, or simply reach down her hand and say, "What's this?" and hold up the hidden book with touching innocence. School is shortened, discipline relaxed, philosophies, histories, languages dropped, English and spelling gradually neglected, finally almost completely ignored. Life is immediate, the job counts, pleasure lies all about after work. Why learn anything save pressing buttons, pulling switches, fitting nuts and bolts? Let me fix your pillow, said Mildred. No, whispered Montag. The zipper displaces the button, and a man lacks just that much time to think while dressing at dawn, a philosophical hour, and thus a melancholy hour. Mildred said, Here! Get away, said Montag. Life becomes one big pratfall, Montag. Everything bang, boff, and wow. Wow, said Mildred, yanking at the pillow. For God's sake, let me be, cried Montag passionately. Beatty opened his eyes wide. Mildred's hand had frozen behind the pillow. Her fingers were tracing the book's outline, and as the shape became familiar, her face looked surprised and then stunned. Her mouth opened to ask a question. Empty the theater, save for clowns, and furnish the rooms with glass walls and pretty colors running up and down the walls, like confetti or blood or sherry or sauterne. You like baseball, don't you, Montag? Baseball's a fine game. Now Beatty was almost invisible, a voice somewhere behind a screen of smoke. What's this? Asked Mildred, almost with delight. Montag heaved back against her arms. What's this here? Sit down, Montag shouted. She jumped away, her hands empty. We're talking. Beatty went on as if nothing had happened. You like bowling, don't you, Montag? Bowling? Yes. And golf? Golf is a fine game. Basketball? A fine game. Billiards? Pool? Football? Fine games, all of them. More sports for everyone. Group spirit, fun. And you don't have to think, eh? Organize and super sports. More cartoons and books. More pictures. The mind drinks less and less. Impatience. Highways full of crowds. Going somewhere, nowhere. The gasoline refugee. Towns turn into motels. People in nomadic surges from place to place, following the moon tides, living tonight in the room where you slept this noon and I the night before. Mildred went out of the room and slammed the door. The parlor aunts began to laugh at the parlor uncles. Now, let's take up the minorities in our civilization, shall we? Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, doctors, lawyers, merchants, chiefs, Mormons, Baptists, Unitarians, second-generation Chinese, Swedes, Italians, Germans, Texans, Brooklynites, Irishmen, people from Oregon or Mexico. The people in this book, this play, this TV serial are not meant to represent any actual painters, cartographers, mechanics, anywhere. The bigger your market, Montag, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. All the minor minorities with their navels to be kept clean. Authors full of evil thoughts. Lock up your typewriters. They did. Magazines became a nice blend of vanilla tapioca. Books, so the damned snobbish critics said, were dishwater. No wonder books stopped selling, the critics said. But the public, knowing what it wanted, spinning happily, let the comic books survive. And the three-dimensional sex magazines, of course. There you have it, Montag. It didn't come from the government down. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick thank God. Today, thanks to them, you can stay happy all the time. You are allowed to read comics, the good old confessions or trade journals. Okay, so I want to pause there for a second to just examine what Beatty has revealed to us so far. Beatty has already revealed that he has an incredible amount of knowledge. When Montag asked about the Master Ridley quote, Beatty was able to quote it word for word, was able to give the history behind it. He is very obviously educated. There's a lot of theories about how he became educated. Perhaps he is old enough to have lived in the society before the what's the word I'm looking for? The ban of books, I guess. But for whatever reason, he seems to be incredibly knowledgeable about history and how this world got the way it did. And these three things are what he says created the world the way that it is now. It wasn't the government. They didn't, latch on to their citizens with an iron control and, mandate these terrible, terrible things that went against the will of the people. The people gave it up themselves. The citizens of the United States had so many, what's the word I'm looking for? So many issues with all of the things in the world that they said, take it away, go away. I don't want it anymore. So first, of course, there was the rise of technology. People prefer technology to things that make them think. I mean, let's be real. If we can have some mindless entertainment, we typically prefer that to things that actually work our brains, as books tend to do. Mass exploitation is another thing that Beatty mentions, the mass media explosion. And then minority pressure, and I think this one is so interesting. Nowadays, we have terms for the minorities who induce censorship amongst the general population. I believe we call them snowflakes, the fragile, sensitive people of the world who say, hey, I don't like that book because it makes people like me look bad, and so that book should be done away with. So Beatty is saying that these minorities actually became so powerful that they got rid of anything with any shred of controversy in it, so that all that was left was uncontroversial material. And uncontroversial material just isn't really thought-provoking. So, what a thought, that rather than being worried about government control and, government pressure and being ready to fight against the government, we need to be worried about ourselves. What are we willing to give up? What are we rejecting in our society? And how is that changing our society? So anyways, okay, Montag has some questions, of course. Yes, but what about the firemen then? Asked Montag. Ah, Beatty leaned forward in the faint mist of smoke from his pipe. What more easily explained and natural? With school turning out more runners, jumpers, racers, tinkerers, grabbers, snatchers, flyers, and swimmers, instead of examiners, critics, knowers, and imaginative creators, the word intellectual, of course, became the swear word it deserved to be. You always dread the unfamiliar. Surely you remember the boy in your own school class who was exceptionally bright, did most of the reciting and answering while the others sat like so many leaden idols, hating him. And wasn't it this bright boy you selected for beatings and tortures after hours? Of course it was. We must all be alike. Not everyone born free and equal, as the Constitution says, but everyone made equal. Each man the image of every other. Then all are happy, for there are no mountains to make them coward to judge themselves against. So, a book is a loaded gun in the house next door. Burn it. Take the shot from the weapon. Breach man's mind. Who knows who might be the target of the well-read man? Me? I won't stomach them for a minute. And so when houses were finally fireproofed completely all over the world, you were correct in your assumption the other night, there was no longer need of firemen for the old purposes. They were given the new job as custodians of our peace of mind, the focus of our understandable and rightful dread of being inferior. Official censors, judges, and executors. That's you, Montag, and that's me. The door to the parlor opened, and Mildred stood there looking in at them, looking at Beatty and then at Montag. Behind her, the walls of the room were flooded with green and yellow and orange fireworks, sizzling and bursting to some music composed almost completely of trap drums, tom-toms, and cymbals. Her mouth moved, and she was saying something, but the sound covered it. Beatty knocked his pipe into the palm of his pink hand, studied the ashes, as if they were a symbol to be diagnosed and searched for meaning. You must understand that our civilization is so vast that we can't have our minorities upset and stirred. Ask yourself, what do we want in this country above all? People want to be happy. Isn't that right? Haven't you heard it all your life? I want to be happy, people say. Well, aren't they? Don't we keep them moving? Don't we give them fun? That's all we live for, isn't it? For pleasure, for titillation. And you must admit our culture provides plenty of those. Yes. Montag could lip read what Mildred was saying in the doorway. He tried not to look at her mouth, because then Beatty might turn and read what was there, too. Colored people don't like Little Black Sambo. Burn it. White people don't feel good about Uncle Tom's Cabin. Burn it. Someone's written a book on tobacco and cancer of the lungs. The cigarette people are weeping. Burn the book. Serenity, Montag. Peace, Montag. Take your fight outside. Better yet, into the incinerator. Funerals are unhappy and pagan. Eliminate them too. 5 minutes after a person is dead, he's on his way to the big flu, the incinerator serviced by helicopters all over the country. 10 minutes after death, a man's a speck of black dust. Let's not quibble over individuals with memoriams. Forget them. Burn them all. Burn everything. Fire is bright and fire is clean. The fireworks died in the parlor behind Mildred. She had stopped talking at the same time, a miraculous coincidence. Montag held his breath. There was a girl next door, he said slowly. She's gone now, I think dead. I can't even remember her face, but she was different. How did she happen? Beatty smiled. Here or there, that's bound to occur. Clarice McClellan, we've a record on her family. We've watched them carefully. Heredity and environment are funny things. You can't rid yourselves of all the odd ducks in just a few years. The home environment can undo a lot you try to do at school. That's why we've lowered the kindergarten age year after year until now we're almost snatching them from the cradle. We had some false alarms on the McClellans when they lived in Chicago. Never found a book. Uncle had a mixed record, antisocial. The girl, she was a time bomb. The family had been feeding her subconscious, I'm sure, from what I saw of her school record. She didn't want to know how a thing was done, but why. And that can be embarrassing. You ask why to a lot of things, and you wind up very unhappy indeed if you keep at it. The poor girl's better off dead. Yes, dead. Luckily, queer ones like her don't happen often. We know how to nip most of them in the bud early. You can't build a house without nails and wood. If you don't want a house built, hide the nails and wood. If you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides to a question to worry him. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. Let him forget there is such a thing as war. If the government is inefficient, top-heavy, and tax-mad, better it be all those than that people worry over it. Peace, Montag. Give the people contests they win by remembering the words to more popular songs or the names of state capitals or how much corn Iowa grew last year. Cram them full of non-combustible data. Chock them so damned full of facts they feel stuffed, but absolutely brilliant with information. Then they'll feel their thinking. They'll get a sense of motion without moving. And they'll be happy because facts of that sort don't change. Don't give them any slippery stuff like philosophy or sociology to tie things up with. That way lies melancholy. Any man who can take a TV wall apart and put it back together again, and most men can nowadays, is happier than any man who tries to slide, rule, measure, and equate the universe, which just won't be measured or equated without making a man feel bestial and lonely. I know, I've tried it. To hell with it. So bring on your clubs and parties, your acrobats and magicians, your daredevils, jet cars, motorcycle helicopters, your sex and heroin, more of everything to do with automatic reflex. If the drama is bad, if the film says nothing, if the play is hollow, sting me with the theremin, loudly. I'll think I'm responding to the play, when it's only a tactile reaction to vibration. But I don't care. I just like solid entertainment. Beatty got up. I must be going. Lecture's over. I hope I have clarified things. The important thing for you to remember, Montag, is we're the happiness boys. The Dixie duo, you and I and the others. We stand against the small tide of those who want to make everyone unhappy with conflicting theory and thought. We have our fingers in the dike. Hold steady. Don't let the torrent of melancholy and drear philosophy drown our world. We depend on you. I don't think you realize how important you are to our happy world as it stands now. Beatty shook Montag's limp hand. Montag still sat, as if the house were collapsing about him and he could not move in the bed. Mildred had vanished from the door. "One last thing," said Beatty. "At least once in his career, every fireman gets an itch. What do the books say, he wonders? Oh, to scratch that itch, eh? Well, Montag, take my word for it. I've had to read a few in my time to know what I was about. And the books say nothing. Nothing you can teach or believe. They're about non-existent people, figments of imagination, if they're fiction. And if they're non-fiction, it's worse. One professor calling another an idiot, one philosopher screaming down another's gullet, all of them running about, putting out the stars and extinguishing the sun. You come away lost." "Well then, what if a fireman accidentally, really not intending anything, takes a book home with him?" Montag twitched. The open door looked at him with its great vacant eye. "A natural error. Curiosity alone," said Beatty. "We don't get over-anxious or mad. We let the fireman keep the book 24 hours. If he hasn't burned it by then, we simply come and burn it for him." "Of course." Montag's mouth was dry. "Well, Montag, will you take another later shift today? Will we see you tonight, perhaps?" "I don't know," said Montag. "Oh, what?" Beatty looked faintly surprised. Montag shut his eyes. "I'll be in later, maybe." "I'd certainly miss you if you didn't show," said Beatty, putting his pipe in his pocket thoughtfully. "I'll never come in again," thought Montag. "Get well and keep well," said Beatty. He turned and went through the open door. Montag watched through the window as Beatty drove away in his gleaming yellow flame-colored Beetle with the black char-colored tires. Across the street and down the way, the other houses stood with their flat fronts. What was it Clarice had said one afternoon? "No front porches. My uncle says there used to be front porches, and people sat there sometimes at night, talking when they wanted to talk, rocking and not talking when they didn't want to talk. Sometimes they just sat there and thought about things, turned things over. My uncle says the architects got rid of the front porches because they didn't look well, but my uncle says that was merely rationalizing it. The real reason, hidden underneath, might be they didn't want people sitting like that, doing nothing, rocking, talking. That was the wrong kind of social life. People talked too much, and they had time to think. So they ran off with the porches. And the gardens, too. Not many gardens anymore to sit around in. And look at the furniture. No rocking chairs anymore. They're too comfortable. Get people up and running around. My uncle says, and my uncle, and my uncle." Her voice faded. All right, so that's where we'll stop today on that sad memory from Clarice. So even if initially we were thinking like, Mildred's really spacey and doesn't pay attention, maybe Clarice is okay, we've pretty much got a confirmation here. If Clarice was not actually dead, it's probably safe to assume that he would have said something about it. So the fact that Beatty says the poor girl's better off dead, he knows exactly who Montag is talking about even before Montag says her name. He knows their history. He knows all about her family. And he seems to confirm for us that Clarice is indeed dead. So that last little bit that we just read was really probably the last words that we'll hear from her. This memory that Montag has of her talking about the reason why it would not benefit their society to have people sitting on front porches, talking and thinking and not engaging with, the mindless entertainment that seems to preoccupy their society. Okay, now, Montag has been given a really exhaustive explanation of why being a fireman is important to people's happiness. And yet, he doesn't seem terribly persuaded. So if Montag is not convinced, if Beatty's explanation hasn't done it for him, we would expect that he'd probably take some sort of action. He'd do something aside from just, keep living his life the way that it was before. So this, of course, begs the question, what will Mr. Montag do next? For one thing, it seems like he might have some plans to deal with that little item under his pillow. So, I mean, the most suspicious question of all time. If a fireman really didn't intend to take a book home with him, what would happen in that totally hypothetical situation that totally couldn't apply to me, right? So, Beatty is probably smart enough to know what this is about, but he says we let him keep the book 24 hours and, then we burn it. No biggie, no problem. So, is it really no biggie, or is this a trap? That will be the ultimate question. So Montag has a book. Maybe he'll look in this book. Maybe he'll find some answers. That definitely would be a reasonable next step. Another kind of confounding factor, of course, is that Montag is not the only one who knows about the book. Mildred, when she was trying to fluff his little pillow, found the book behind the pillow. Almost seemed like she was about to turn him in, which would make no sense, since that definitely would work against her self-interest, and she seems very interested in herself. But anyways, so we'll have to see what happens with Montag and Mildred. Will he somehow get her to support his investigation into, life and why it is the way it is and how we truly find happiness? Or will Mildred, stab him in the back and turn him in? So Beatty says that the firemen are responsible for preserving happiness. And sometimes I get questions about this sentence. Dyke, D-Y-K-E, has a couple of definitions. One definition is a very large wall designed to hold back the sea. There is a story, which obviously Beatty must be familiar with, a tale of a little Dutch girl who sees a hole in the dike that holds back the sea and puts her finger in the hole to stop the sea from coming in. So that's what Beatty is comparing them to, this sea of unhappiness. We must hold it back. We must stop the flow of unhappiness into this world. All right, let's see if there's anything else. Let's see. Yes. I thought this bit was kind of interesting, the kind of happiness strategy that Beatty outlines, because it sounds so familiar. Contests people win by remembering the words to more popular songs. I swear there was a reality show out there where they start to play a song and then people have to start singing the words, and if they can do it correctly, then they win money or something. Names of state capitals, how much corn Iowa grew last year. That has to be like a Jeopardy reference or something. If Jeopardy was even around in the 1950s, maybe that was a Ray Bradbury prediction too. But point being, if you think about all of the shows out there that you can profit and get entertainment from just memorizing random, trivial, useless facts. And of course, we're impressed by people like that. These Jeopardy people who go on for weeks and weeks and have all of these random facts inside their head. We're like, wow, they know so much stuff. But ultimately, does that kind of knowledge really matter? Memorizing random facts about the world? Is that what's important? Is that what keeps us happy? Didn't know. Okay. Anything else from Beatty's section? A little bit more about the minorities and the strategy for dealing with these offended people. If somebody doesn't like something, burn it. Fire seems to solve all problems. Yeah, okay. And then the last thing I want to mention, I think this is about where we left off. Yeah. This section, I think, gives us a clue into Beatty's background. Maybe I'm reading it too much into it, but the bright boy in your school class did most of the reciting and the answering, and people hated him, and he was beaten and tortured after hours. I almost wonder if that's a clue into Beatty's background. Was he the smart kid, the little nerd who knew everything in class, and he got made fun of, and he got bullied, and now he spent his life eliminating knowledge so that there is no more bullying or victimization of smart people, the little nerds of the world. I almost wonder. I wonder if that is a clue. But he says we must all be alike. And on that note, I will refer you once again to Harrison Bergeron. So I mentioned this was a society that has become a dystopia due to its obsession with equality. Fahrenheit 451 obviously does have some links to trying to make people equal, intellectually speaking at least, but not to the extreme, definitely, that Harrison Bergeron does. So the question that I have for you, a single question, but it will probably require a few sentences to answer. When you are thinking about Fahrenheit 451, the speech that Captain Beatty just made, we must all be alike, everyone made equal, burn the intellectual differences. How does this thought, this philosophy, this belief system, how does that connect to Harrison Bergeron, the story that you are about to read? So I want you to describe the connections between these two worlds, these two dystopias. And the more connections you can make, the better. Connections between characters or societies or technology or anything that you can really see that links these two potential dystopias. So today, in total, we're really exploring three dystopias. Wall-E is adorable, but it is still a dystopia. It is still a potentially horrific outcome for how our world could turn out and how our society could turn out. We still have good old Fahrenheit 451 that we're cruising our way through, and we have Harrison Bergeron. So what will the future look like? I don't know, but they are all very interesting and very different views of how our society might end up. So anyways, that is what I will leave you with. And if you can construct your response in some sort of lovely Google document and submit it on Canvas, then that will conclude your mission for today.